The Quiet Repairs. Tonight, on our channel, a small-town story about second chances that don't arrive with trumpet blasts, but on the soft shuffle of ordinary days. Meet Walter, 68, patching boats and old promises on a salt-bitten New Jersey bay. There's a sister who knows his silences, a neighbor with a laugh like a porch bell, and the kind of town where every diner mug remembers a hand. If you're over 50, you'll feel the grain of this wood. If you're under it, you'll hear how it creaks. Stay with us. Part 1, the pier after Labor Day. The last tourists had lifted out like gulls. Signs that once promised live music and lemon ice now folded against sun-peeled siding. On the boardwalk, the paint flaked in delicate chips, as if the summer were a brittle thing cracking along its seams. Walter Hale tightened the cleat on his skiff and tested the knot twice. Not because the bay needed proof of his hands, but because the hands needed proof of themselves. He stood, 68 and sturdy, despite the arthritis that wrapped the knuckles in rainy weather. The doctor had said, with the friendliness of a man who owned good sneakers, use them or lose them. So each morning Walter used them. Down the pier, across the warped planks, into the little shed where he sharpened chisels, set screws straight, and accepted boats that had nothing wrong with them except the private shame of age. The shed smelled of linseed and salt. On the door he'd nailed a driftwood sign, Quiet Repairs. It made the few remaining summer people smile with a quick conspiratorial softness, as if the idea of modest fixes were indecently hopeful. He was tightening the brass hinges of a hatch when he heard the bicycle bell. Lorna coasted down the pier with a scarf tugged to her throat, the color of sunrise. She had always liked bright things. At 64 she wore rings that could blind a seagull and sneakers with a silver stripe. She braked hard, pretending not to be winded. "Morning, Walt," she said. "Your mailbox coughed up something." She held out a postcard. It was soft at the edges, and the picture, a lake with mountains, looked like a place that had been beautifully mowed. On the back, in careful penmanship, "Dad, I'm teaching near Denver this fall. I'll be back east at some point. Thought of you when I passed a marina. Tyler." Walter read it twice as if there were a trick. His son's name was a word he held with tongs. He had not heard it aloud in a year. Estrangement was not a storm, but fog. You kept walking, and then there was nothing to touch. "He wrote you," Lorna said, not asking permission to be glad. "He did," Walter said. "You're going to answer?" "I'll think on it," he said, slipping the card into the pocket of his canvas coat. He could feel the ridges through the fabric like ribs. They looked out at the bay where the water breathed against pylons. "You working late?" Lorna asked. "I've got the Escobar skiff. He says the throttle sticks. It's the cable, it's always the cable." "Or pride," Lorna smiled. "Want lunch? I can bring something from May's. You know she made the meatloaf right the old way." "May's always right the old way," he said. "I'll be there at 1. She pushed off. The bicycle bell again. The morning resumed. Gulls heckling the silence. A breeze that smelled vaguely electrical. The wires along the pier hissed sometimes, a memory of storms. Walter tried to return to his hinge, but the letters on the postcard's face, Denver, kept seeping through his coat. He imagined mountains shaped like folded fists. He had never been farther than Ohio. At noon he set his tools in a line, wiped the handles with an old shirt, and locked the shed. On the walk to the diner he passed the shuttered taffy shop and the fortune-teller's booth where a plastic hand lay under dusty glass. He thought of the times he had brought Tyler here as a boy, teaching him to name the boats not by their paint, but by the way they sat the water. Tyler had learned too quickly. He'd wanted more. The bell above May's door nudged the air, and the smell of coffee came with it. Honest, slightly burnt, a daily compromise. May waved from behind the counter. She was 55 and knew everyone's blood pressure. She had a forearm like a librarian, and poured coffee with the exactness of a curate. "You're late, Walter," she said, a friendly accusation. "My sister's fault," he said. "She found news." "Postcard news," Lorna said, sliding into the booth by the window. "From Tyler." May's eyebrows rose. "Well, I'll be. Meatloaf and a small slice of hope, then." Just the meatloaf, Walter said. May leaned in, softening. You'll write him, she said, not as a question. I might, he said. Don't be stubborn because it suits your coat. She glanced at his canvas, which had a tear too honest to mend. It's a young man's stubbornness to say later. Later is a floorboard you shouldn't trust. Walter smiled with a roux that felt lighter than it should have. You ever fix a throttle cable? He asked. I fixed 100, May said. They're called brothers, husbands, and occasionally cousins. They ate. At the far end of the counter, Ramon Escobar laughed at something on his phone. His laugh a bright porch bell that drew glances and made people lean in without knowing it. Ramon ran the landscaping crew that made the town look curated from May to August and resolutely itself the rest of the year. He lifted a hand when he noticed them. Walter, he called. You see my skiff? She's lazy. She's obedient, Walter said. You let her know it. Ramon grinned. You'll fix her how you fixed my mower, with a story until she's ashamed into working. Stories are cheaper than parts, Walter said. They paid and stood, and Lorna tugged his sleeve. Come by tonight, she said. I found the old video of Tyler's 8th grade concert. He played that piece where the clarinets look like they swallowed bees. I'll see, Walter said. You'll come, she said. I'll make tea that makes the house smell like promise. He returned to the pier with a slower step that had nothing to do with age. In the shed, the tools lay where he'd left them. Polite, willing. He took out the postcard again, ran a thumb along the edge, and on a clean square of scrap wood he wrote a few words in pencil. Proud of you, always. He stared until they blurred. Then, with the same care, he gave a hatch hinge. He erased them to the soft ghost that wood keeps. There would be a right sentence. He would find it among the screws and oil. The afternoon widened. The bay attended, listening without comment. Part 2. May's ledger and the cable that lied. By midweek, the air had softened into that reluctant warmth October keeps in its cuffs. Walter opened Ramon's skiff and traced the throttle cable, which was indeed the cable and also not. Its sheath had split where it curved beneath the console, a sly, fibbing wound that looked minor and felt grave. He could splice and tape it for a season or replace it as he would a bad habit. Ramon arrived as the sky moved from tin to pearl, humming a tune that suggested applause. You and your miracles, he said. No miracles, Walter said. Just stubborn wire. Same thing, Ramon said. He put a paper bag on the workbench. May's empanadas. She says to tell you food is a letter you don't have to think about. Walter smiled despite himself. She writes better than I do. Ramon looked at the cable, pursed his lips, and then, because he was a man who believed in payment, not only in money, he spoke about the lawns on Birch Street, the old dog that slept in the shade of a maple like a forgotten coat, the widow who put out a thermos with a note, You are seen. The town, through Ramon's mouth, sounded kinder than it was. Perhaps kindness is a side effect of attention applied like oil to hinges. They worked together, Walter with a splicer and heat shrink, Ramon with a rag and the dignity of holding the light. At last the cable sat new and modest beneath its sheath, the kind of fix that would not demand thank yous. They eased the skiff into idle. The engine coughed, thought about the day and accepted it. Ramon's laugh rang. She lives. I will charge her rent. Keep her moving, Walter said. Engines like honesty. People too, Ramon said. He hesitated. You heard from your boy again? Not yet, Walter said. You'll hear, Ramon said. You're the pier. People come back to piers. After he left, the shed seemed roomy with the absence. Walter took a small notebook from the drawer, a ledger only by courtesy. He had once kept a careful book, columns tidy as a ward nurse. But in the years after Marla's death, the entries had thinned, then wandered. Now he wrote what a boat told him, and sometimes what the weather said about a person, which is to say nothing you'd read in court. On the top line he wrote, Escobar skiff, throttle cable replaced, tea recommended. Then, after a pause, Tyler, mountains, postcard. Reply? He closed the book and felt, foolishly, that he had shelved something heavy. The afternoon brought a customer with a face full of grievance. The man was 53, a summer homeowner whose job required a grin he was no longer able to manufacture. His name was Grant, and his speedboat, blunt as an argument, had a name stenciled in chrome: Synergy. "It pulls left," Grant said, as if accusing a politician. "Brand new trim tabs, and I can't keep her straight." Walter listened as he listened to the radio weather, a stream he knew not to take personally. He took the boat out in the neat chop and let it declare itself. At a certain speed, the hull veered like a horse with an opinion. Back at the dock, he placed a hand on the stern as he would on a child's shoulder. "She favors what you favor," he said. "You're leaning. Your back's telling on you." Grant stared. "My back?" "Favoring one leg will read in the hands," Walter said. "Your tabs are fine. Sit straight. Let her know you mean to listen." Grant looked as if a refund had been stolen from him, but he managed a grudging thanks. When he'd left, Walter sat on a crate and laughed once. Gentle, not cruel. Quiet repairs. At dusk, Lorna appeared with a plastic bag of tea and the glow of a woman who remembered to be happy. "Tonight," she said, "the concert video. I made those lemon cookies the shape of nothing." He locked the shed and followed her along the familiar sidewalk, where grass pressed through cracks like volunteers that would not be refused. Inside Lorna's living room, the old television balanced on an old table, and the DVD player breathed like a thing that wanted to be thanked. She pressed play, and Tyler, 13, earnest, filled the screen, clarinet held like a problem that someone had promised was manageable. He played the piece everyone in America learns at some point, the one with optimism built into its bones. He looked, even then, beyond the gymnasium, past the folding chairs, toward a more exacting room. Walter watched himself in the background, 43, a pair of hands folded too politely. He remembered his advice afterward. Don't rush the part that's easy. How often had he given that advice again without the clarinet? About cars and girls and job interviews, about marriage and bills. The easy parts grow bored by your competence and slide away. When the video ended, the room sat in that quiet that attends rooms well used. Lorna poured tea that did indeed promise. "You'll write him," she said. Walter nodded as if the decision had been his. "Tomorrow," he said, and felt the floorboard of later bend under his heel. He shifted his weight and said it again. "Tomorrow." He walked home along streets that wore their porch lights like modest jewelry. At his small kitchen table, under a chipped lamp, he took proper stationery. Marla had bought too much, and it had outlived her, and wrote, "Tyler, the mountains look like folded sails. I'm glad to know you're well. The bay here keeps its manners. If you come east, we'll take the skiff out at dawn and let the gulls decide our route. I never told you enough. I am proud of you, Dad." He read it 6 times, counted his pride like coins, and sealed the envelope before he could renegotiate. He addressed it to the Denver school bleached onto the card and placed it by the door. He slept. The house made the small night sounds of a home that forgives you. Part 3, the long weekend and small braveries. Saturday delivered what it always did in the fall. A market that occupied the municipal lot with pumpkins posed like a family portrait and apples arranged like good grades. The air smelled of cinnamon and diesel. May had a stall where, in addition to pies, she sold jars of pickled courage, which is to say cucumbers she had persuaded into honesty. She waved Walter over with a wooden spoon. "You mailed it?" she asked. "I did," he said. "It went into the blue box like a coin into a wishing well." "Then that's that," she said, and handed him a slice of apple cake that wanted to be warmed. Ramon arrived with his wife, Elena, and their teenage niece, who looked at everything with the respectful irony of youth. He bought Mums with the seriousness of a gift he would not underestimate. Grant passed in a cap that suggested surrender. He nodded at Walter with a respect that had not been purchased but earned. Around noon, clouds gathered in a way that made old knees comment. People folded tents with the choreography of experience. Walter walked to the pier, where the water darkened to a sermon color and rolled down the shed door just in case. He sat inside with the radio low, hearing the weatherwoman speak of a system moving up the coast, rain with intention, wind like an opinionated aunt. He did a quiet inventory of ropes and tarps, of loose things that did not know they were loose. While he worked, a girl of maybe 12 stood at the door, nursing a hot chocolate that had declared war on its lid. She peered in, brave in the way of children who have been told that the world is not only a place but a set of doors. "Can I help you?" Walter asked. She gestured at the sign. "Do you fix quiet things?" "I try," he said. She came in a little damp around the edges. "My granddad's radio stopped. He listens to the ball games like their church. We moved him into the apartment next to ours last week, and he says the new walls are confused. Mom bought him a new radio, but he wants the old one because the Yankees win more on that one." Walter nodded. "Bring it by," he said. She looked at his hands the way people look at tools, measuring. "I will," she said, and hurried back into the rain that had begun to audition for seriousness. By evening the wind had learned the names of smaller things. Lorna called, voice bright with that practical excitement storms bring to the organized. "I'll keep the flashlights," she said. "You keep the coffee." "Done," Walter said. The rain came right and proper. He went to bed with the comfort of a roof that had been tested. At 2 a.m. he woke, not to the wind, but to a thought. "Proud of you." He wondered if he had written it to Tyler too late or too plain, if the words had arrived like a tip on a bill paid yesterday. He had the urge to go out and stand on the porch, to see the street in its wild sleep, to remind himself that weather, like regret, can be waited out. He did not get up. He breathed with the house and let the attic settle in its old bones. In the morning branches had been relocated, but the world was largely where he had left it. He checked the pier for mischief, found none, and in the afternoon the 12-year-old returned with a radio strapped by a belt. Her name was Evie, she said, and her granddad was 68, a number that sounded to her like a badge. Walter opened the radio's back. The solder looked tired. He cleaned contacts, burned his finger lightly, and replaced a small, cranky capacitor he happened to have in a drawer, the same kind of luck that makes strangers friends. When he switched it on, a broadcaster's voice rose warm as a good jacket. Evie grinned, then sobered with the gravity of a messenger. "How much?" she asked. $2, Walter said, "and a promise to tell your granddad the Yankees won on the old radio because they remembered him." She paid in quarters, each with the past on it. As she left, she said, "You fix people things." It was not a compliment, only an observation that made him stand still after the door shut. That night, Lorna sent a photo of Tyler at 20, a picture he had forgotten, taken on the day he left for college. A boy with an engineer's gaze and a comedian's mouth, a duffel bag that exaggerated his seriousness. He was always himself, Lorna wrote. Walter stared as if the past were a window that might slide open if the latch were located. He poured coffee into a mug that read, "World's Okayest Mechanic," a gift from May on one of those faux holidays that sell balloons, and carried it to the porch. The street held a damp post-storm kindness. He said aloud, to nobody but the potted fern Marla had once downjudged as polite, "If he comes, we'll go out at dawn." The fern did not object. Part 4. Mail that walks in a town that listens. On Tuesday, May brought a cake to the pier in a tin that had housed cakes for a generation. "For when the answer comes," she said. "Assumes facts not in evidence," Walter said, but he took the tin. "You want a guarantee," May said. "Those are for toasters." In the late morning, the mail carrier, a man of 59 with calves like destiny, waved a bundle of envelopes as he danced down the pier. "Incoming," he called, with the cheerfulness of a man who plays Santa all seasons. There was a bill shaped like a sermon and 2 coupons stitched together like a bad marriage. The last envelope held a return address that made his thumb shake. Douglas County School District. He did not open it right away. He placed it on the workbench, set a rag on top as if it were a bird that needed calming, and made a spectacle of polishing a chisel. Only when the shadow of the doorway lengthened did he open it. Inside, a letter on school paper that was somehow both official and painfully human. "Dad," it began, and he could not proceed for several seconds. I got your letter. The mountains do look like sails if you squint past the tourist stuff. The kids are good. 7th graders are clever and don't know it yet. I'm back east for a conference in Philly the first weekend of November. If it's okay, I could rent a car, drive down Saturday, and be out of your hair by Sunday night. I could use the bay. I could use you. Tyler. The words were plain, and they undid him more effectively than eloquence would have. He folded the letter, not carefully, and sat on the crate until the smell of linseed suggested motion. He wanted to tell someone and also to keep the news in his mouth like a peppermint. Ramon appeared as if conjured by good fortune. Walter showed him the letter without commentary. Ramon read, his grin filling the shed. "You'll clean the skiff like it's meeting the governor," he said. "I'll oil the hinges so quietly they'll apologize," Walter said. "Tell May," Ramon said. "She may bake a cake the town can see from space." He did tell May, and she did, and somehow the news ran ahead of him along every sidewalk. People congratulated him with a courtesy he had not expected and did not reject. Grant brought coffee and with commendable restraint did not offer advice. The week learned a new tempo. Walter caught himself repairing things out of sequence as if he had lifted the needle and set it down elsewhere on the same song. He wrote back to Tyler, "Of course. Saturday is hungry for you. Dawn is at 6, but Dawn can be moved." He put the letter in the blue box and did not watch the truck take it away, because there is such a thing as over-ceremony. On Thursday evening, Lorna appeared with a list in pencil. "Here's what we won't forget," she said. "Coffee, extra jackets, the good thermos, a bag of those nuts you pretend not to like." He read the list with mock severity. "You forgot the portable silence," he said. "Tyler may need quiet more than he needs coffee." "I'll bring both," she said. The days collected themselves. Evie stopped by with a Yankees score and a hug that wasn't for him but near him, which is nearly the same. The pier, which all summer had been the stage for other people's weekends, became briefly his. On Saturday morning he woke before the alarm to a sky that had been wiped with steel wool. He made coffee strong enough to stand a spoon, put the thermos in a tote like a baby, and walked to the pier with a step that made sidewalks approve. The skiff sat at her mooring, alert. He arranged the life jackets twice, checked the fuel, listened to the engine's throat. It spoke well. At 10, a car pulled into the lot. Rental, light-colored. The kind of car that apologizes for not being anyone's. Tyler stepped out. He was 38 now, lean and tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. He looked like himself and not like himself, which is what sons do best at mosquitoes in airports. "Hey," Tyler said as if they had parted at breakfast. "Hey," Walter said as if the same. They shook hands, then hugged, then stood side by side looking at the bay until the awkwardness could disperse like breath. Walter pointed. "She's ready," he said, nodding at the skiff. Tyler smiled, and the boy at the clarinet slid briefly across his face. "Let's go," he said. They went. Part 5. Dawn. Mended. The bay in November is a different country. The colors are chastened and honest, the wind is a teacher, and the water does not play host to inflatables shaped like flamingos. Walter guided them out past the breakwater and let the throttle settle into a contentment that matched the boat's age. For a while they spoke in remarks about the obvious, what the weather was and what the gulls thought of it, like men stepping around a hole in the floor they both knew was there. They had an old argument somewhere, a score that had removed itself from sheet music but left a wrinkle in the table. Tyler broke first, looking straight ahead. "I was unkind," he said. "When Mom was sick." After, Walter kept his hands where they were, on a wheel that had forgiven worse. "We were unkind together," he said. "We thought we were arguing about logistics when we were arguing about love." Tyler nodded. "I was impatient with your patience. It felt like cowardice to me then. I wanted to fight something with a name, and you tied knots." "I did tie knots," Walter said, smiling. "Useful ones, but they were not a cure." They let the engine idle. The boat rocked with the bay's slow pulse. Tyler took a breath that sounded misfiled under bravery. "When I called you about the job in Colorado," he said, "you said it's far. I heard you say, 'Don't go.' I meant, you'll be far and I will miss you, Walter said, which is a different sentence, and I did not say it. I had the words, but they stuck to my pride like burrs. Tyler laughed, a short, honest bark. They run away from me too, the right ones. Then we'll chase them together, Walter said. We'll corner them gently. They fell into a conversation about students, his and mechanical things, Walter's, that braided into something like mutual grammar. Tyler talked about a boy who solved for X the way some children find their reading voice, in private first, then out loud. Walter spoke of a woman who thought her boat's problem was noise when it was heat. They admired one another's stories without needing to borrow them. At noon they returned to the pier, where Lorna waited with May's scandalous sandwiches. Ramon drifted by as if rehearsing casualness. They ate at the end of the pier with the bravado of unwrapped food in a gull's jurisdiction. Tyler described Denver's light. It has volume, he said, as if you could set it in a cup. And Lorna told a story about their father's habit of throwing loose nails in coffee cans that later poked holes in the cans. He was thrift that punched itself, she said. Stay the night, Walter said, as if the invitation were an umbrella that could be raised without figures of speech. I should, Tyler said, and I will, but I have to drive up early tomorrow. They walked the boardwalk where off-season shops offered socks and apologies. They stood by the fortune-teller's booth. Tyler touched the glass. She told me once I'd cross water to find home, he said. You always did like a riddle, Walter said. Evening came in a sweater. Back at the house, Walter made dinner with the slow assurance of a man who had cooked when it mattered. They ate chicken that remembered its purpose and green beans that didn't pretend to be more than green beans. After they sat with coffee and, obedient to tradition, said too little. Silence was a piece of furniture they both knew how to use. Do you still have the clarinet? Walter asked. It's in a closet with my ambitions, Tyler said and smiled. I play Happy Birthday badly for students who don't turn in homework. Walter laughed in a way that crept out quick, like an animal that had been waiting. Bring it next time, he said. Next time, Tyler said, testing the phrase. Yes. They made beds. The house did the small night creaks that safe houses do. Walter lay awake for a while and felt something near his ribs that was not pain. Gratitude has poor handwriting, but you can recognize it if you squint. In the morning he rose early, made consolation pancakes, and wrapped a stack for the road. At 8, Tyler hugged him like a man who had carried a heavy thing a long time and found someone willing to share it. Don't be a stranger, Walter said, and hated the sentence as soon as it left his mouth. Its cowardly cheer, its distance disguised as warmth. Tyler answered better. I won't, he said. And you either. He gestured to the postcard on the refrigerator. Come see the mountains. They're real. When the car turned the corner, Walter stood for a long minute, the way men do after departures, as if the street might want an epilogue. Then he went to the pier because work, unlike grief, will permit your attendance without explaining itself. Part 6. Quiet Repairs. The week after Tyler's visit, the town practiced its winter face. The market reduced itself to essentials. The high school put out flyers for a play whose title implied a lesson. The pier grew eloquent in hammers and short conversations. Evie returned with her granddad, a man of 68 with a collar he had clearly ironed. He shook Walter's hand as if he were accepting a medal on behalf of someone braver. She says you fixed the radio, he said. I think you fixed the station too. Yankees didn't deserve to win, but they did. He smiled. I suppose that's the point. Walter showed him the capacitor he'd replaced, the old one sitting on a shelf like a retired villain. They spoke baseball, which is the art of remembering statistics until they become forgiveness. When they left, Evie pressed a drawing into Walter's palm. It showed a boat labeled Quiet Repairs, and a man with a rectangle body and hands like kind words. He taped it to the shed wall where it made every tool look humble. Ramon's skiff behaved itself. Grant learned to sit straight. May started a book club for people who swore they didn't read. Every Thursday their laughter slid under the diner door, like contraband. The fortune-teller's booth got a new light bulb and therefore a new future. Lorna bought holly too early and defended herself with cake. On a Tuesday, the mail carrier brought another letter from Denver. Dad, it said, the conferences were a swarm, but good. I told a colleague here that my father holds a town together with bolts and a look. He said that sounded like a job title. I'm back at Christmas if the roads permit. The clarinet is located. Prepare yourself. There was a doodle of a mountain that looked suspiciously like a sheep. Walter sat on his crate and let the letter be inside him for a while. He thought of Marla, of her honest eyes when she disagreed with him, of the last weeks when everything smelled faintly of lemons because Lorna had insisted. He thought of his own father, whose love had been a set of instructions, some clear, some not. He thought of the pier, which did not ask to be admired, but held things together anyway. He wrote back in his careful hand, Christmas waits. The skiff will act decent. I will too. Bring the clarinet and your appetite. The bay has a story to tell you about wind. Dad. He walked the letter to the blue box himself. On the way he stopped at May's for coffee, and left with not only coffee but a loaf of bread wrapped in a pinion. He continued, past Birch Street's sleeping lawns, past the apartment where Evie's granddad lived, where a baseball game spoke through a wall in half sentences and the click of a patient tongue. At the pier he unlocked the shed and, for no good reason, sorted the screws into mason jars by size with a fastidiousness that would have alarmed him in younger days. There is a sweetness in order when the world is not orderly. He labeled the jars with a black marker, Number 8, Number 10, Pride, Regret, then crossed out the last two and wrote assorted. In the late afternoon, clouds stacked themselves along the horizon like folded blankets. A wind rose that felt like advice. Walter stepped onto the boardwalk and followed its length as people do when they have nothing to buy and much to consider. He paused at the plastic hand in the fortune-teller's window, reflected there as a ghostly double. We're all learning, he said to the hand, and then, embarrassed to himself, he laughed. The small laugh of a man who has been forgiven and is learning how to be. When he returned to the shed, the sun had lowered itself without complaint. He found the ledger and, under Ramon's throttle cable and Grant's tabs, under Tyler. Mountains, he wrote, quiet repairs, ongoing. He closed the book, switched off the radio, and listened to what remained. The water, the ropes, his own breath. He locked the door and stood a while on the pier's end, where the town made its soft noises and the bay kept its promise. There would be more repairs. There always were. The trick, if there was one, was to begin before the floorboard gave way, to say I'm proud of you before pride required an apology, to hold a boat steady and let it find the line it wanted. In the distance, a gull heckled the general idea of dignity. Walter raised a hand in reply because even hecklers deserve courtesy. Then he walked home, hands in his coat pockets, as the streetlights came on one by one, like ordinary stars. If this story kept you company, give it a like so more folks can find it. Tell me in the comments which moment felt most true to your life. And if you enjoy quiet human stories like this, subscribe for more, new tales every week.